we were both raised in Catholic families with parents who were good examples of living a Catholic marriage. And I think partly because of that, it can be easy to not realize or to take for granted the teachings of the church. These teachings that we followed our whole lives. And so events like this, I think, are incredibly important for all of us to look again at what it is that we've been given. So thank you for organizing. And what we've been asked to share about is our experience of following the teachings of the church.
Okay. So Sam and I met in undergrad while I was here at St. Thomas. He was at the U of M, and we met actually just a few blocks from here at a house with mutual friends. We got married at the end of undergraduate and were able to finish our studies together abroad in Rome, which was a really beautiful start and fun start to our marriage. We even packed up my wedding dress and Sam's tux, and of course took public transportation down to St. Peter's Square to have our marriage blessed by the Pope. Shortly after coming home from Rome, our kids started coming quickly. Catherine, who's now 7, was born within our first year of marriage, and then roughly every 2 years, we have Henry, Jane, and Willa, who's 1.5. So now, just 8 years later, we have a very busy and particularly crazy, I would say, brood of kids. They're not here, obviously. You would hear them. Now, I realize that this level of fertility is a gift, and it's true. We've never experienced the cross of infertility. But also with the gift of fertility comes its own cross or responsibility. And that's what I want to highlight in the next couple of minutes. So, our life was continuing pretty normal, although chaotic. We had the 4 children, and I had also experienced fairly significant postpartum depression after each of our kids, which is just a part of our particular journey in marriage. And I really do mean our, because it's both of our cross. And the other thing that we noticed in our family is we had a ton of doctor's appointments for our son. And a lot. I felt like we were living at Children's in Gillette. And my mom, who raised 7 kids, said she never went to the doctor this much with all of us combined. So that is just a fact of our life. I'm trying to just say the facts and cut the emotion. And the appointments were all necessary but seemingly unconnected. Until the end of last summer, we did genetic testing on our son, and were called just a few weeks later with his diagnosis of a rare chromosomal syndrome. So of course, this answered a lot of questions for us and connected all those random doctor's appointments, which was nice, but it also changed the scope of what the rest of our life would look like. And who still knows to what degree, but definitely significant. And also changed the following year would look a lot different. So we had this beautiful plan to homeschool our kids because I had a beautiful experience of that growing up, and Sam watched his younger siblings be homeschooled, and so that was just what we wanted for our kids. Until this diagnosis, we realized very quickly that the following year would be full of more doctor's appointments. We saw about 15 specialists, and also that our son needed a very high structure that homeschooling or me couldn't provide. So within a few weeks of this diagnosis, we had our oldest enrolled at St. Croix Catholic and our son at the public preschool. Basically, I'm telling you all these facts, personal facts, hoping it helps some along their journey, but also to understand the next part of our journey in marriage and following the teachings of the church. So this is the part of our story that one of our friends told us never to share. He said that will just freak people out. And that is that we ended up needing to abstain for over a year after our son's diagnosis. And it was a very, given my my experience of postpartum depression and this diagnosis, it was a fairly clear, discerning process and decision. Even though it's extreme, so is our life, it seems. And so with all these facts, it was, this is what we felt we were being called to in our marriage at that point. And the thing that was funny to me is so many people that I knew, or people that I have told this to, would say, oh, well, we could never do that. And all I could think was, well, we could never do that either. And it speaks to me. I think Pope Paul VI refers to this too in talking about abstinence. He says, yet there is no doubt that to many it will appear not merely difficult, but even impossible to observe. So this law demands from individual men and women, from families and from human society, a resolute purpose and great endurance. Indeed, it cannot be observed unless God comes to their help, with the grace by which the goodwill of men is sustained and strengthened. And that is completely my experience, which is we've had an extreme amount of grace in the last year, including grace from the sacrament of marriage itself, because I would have said to those friends, like, well, it's not like we have a different marriage. Like, we could never have done that either without, like, first the clear reason and then the grace that has been given to us. I also would have never guessed that it would strengthen our marriage. And I'm not saying that abstaining that long is a little feat, but it has definitely opened a door to us about the deeper truth of marriage. When Pope Paul VI talks about the value of self-discipline in regards to periods of abstinence, he says, self-discipline of this kind is a shining witness to the chastity of husband and wife, and far from being a hindrance to their love for one another, transforms it by giving it a more truly human character. He also goes on to say that this self-discipline arouses in them a consciousness of their responsibilities, which was also completely true, because if you're given a child with special needs, there are more serious responsibilities. And to allow that to sink in within our life and marriage even has been one of the gifts of this year. So we've seen a growth in depth and also a much more serious way of facing the reality of our lives and the beautiful responsibility of our children.
So we got to attend one of our friends' weddings recently, and it was a wonderful witness and example of the vocation of marriage and the sacrament, and the joy of a couple excitedly saying yes to their vocation. And one of the readings said something along the lines of, you offer your body as a physical sacrifice in marriage. And the priest then reiterated that in his homily. He said that in choosing to get married, you are saying that you will sacrifice yourself completely for your spouse, even to the point of sacrificing your life. And the wedding couple is sitting there smiling, and they're excited, and they're wholeheartedly saying yes to this huge commitment. And it reminded me of the feelings that I had at our wedding. I had a sense that I'd met the perfect woman, and I knew I wanted to live my whole life with her and give everything I had to her and sacrifice myself completely. And the vocation that the church teaches us of, which is one of a complete unity of man and woman and a total gift of self. We knew that's what the church proposed, and we knew that we wanted that. And so we excitedly said yes to this. And then after the wedding, then you're married. And the thing about being married is you spend a lot of time with your spouse. And this person that you thought was perfect, you realize they're not quite as perfect as you thought. So Beth, she found out pretty quickly that I'm very crabby when I wake up, and that I don't clean the kitchen very well, and that I don't always drive the way that she wants me to, and that I can be selfish, and that I can be lazy, and a million other problems that I have, or, real problems, just as an individual. And slowly, this great blessing that you are aware of, and this huge desire that you have, rather than seeing it as a gift, you can start to see it as an obstacle for your happiness. Because you start to think, it doesn't sound so great to be sacrificing myself for this imperfect person. I thought this was a perfect person, which is like, if it's perfect, how hard is it to sacrifice for them? But you can start to see that the sacrifice is difficult. And then you add in 4 kids, and depression, and a year of abstinence, and doctor's visits, and finances, and all the stuff of family life. And suddenly there's a lot of sacrifice, and there's a lot of responsibility. And there are moments then where I can find myself asking, well, what is this that I've gotten into? And you can start to say, why is this person so hard? And why do I have to sacrifice so much? Why can't I just be happy? And why do I have to give up so much of what I want for this relationship and for these kids? But these moments of doubt and these feelings of frustration, they are not evidence that the original desire wasn't true. And this is important because I think we mistake this frequently. We think that the feelings that we have today can show us that a truth that we knew in the past was incorrect. And really obvious example, there's nothing we can do today to, say, make America never be found, never to have been founded, right? We can't change that. It happened in the past. And yet somehow I think that because I'm frustrated with my marriage now, the desire that I had to give myself completely in the past wasn't true. And this is a huge mistake. And the question then is not, how do I escape this terrible thing called marriage? The question is, how do I live that desire that I had before? How do I stay true to what I actually want in this relationship? How do I live that yes that I had then today? And I think what I've seen is that there are 2 things that are necessary for this to be possible. The first is the teachings of the church. And this is important because the church can hold out in front of us the truth of our relationship. It's a continual reminder and signpost, something in front of us that says, this is what your vocation is. This is how you live it. Follow this. And Pope Paul VI says in Humanae Vitae, the church must continue to announce the truth of marriage, the full truth of marriage. And he says, it's not charitable, it's not loving for the church to hide the truth of marriage. It's not loving to water it down. Because we need this truth in front of us. Because that original desire that I had, I still have it. And I want to know, where do I say yes? What am I saying yes to? And so we need the church to proudly pronounce this teaching so that I have something, a place to put my desire, a way to say yes. Even with that, though, in front of me, there's still the personal laziness, selfishness, sinfulness, inability to adhere to what I actually desire. And so the second thing that's necessary that I've seen is to be accompanied by others. And there's lots of examples of this, but a recent one is this was 2 Saturdays ago. I was pretty despondent and feeling like our life is hard, my marriage is hard, and my thought was like, I just want the day to be over, I don't want to live the rest of today. We were driving to the grocery store to get groceries for dinner, And we see our friend drive around the corner in his white truck. And Beth says, hey, let's call Marley and see if Marley and Margaret want to come over for dinner. And so she calls them, and they come over for dinner. And we spend the evening together, and I see in this time that we spend together, I'm changed. I'm brought back to life by being with them. And in being brought back to life, my desire is reawakened. I can recommit to following what I know to be true. And so that's necessary, to be brought back to life by friends who are on the same journey. And one last thing to note. We read recently, in the movement that we're a part of, Communion and Liberation, we recently read the experience of a woman who, over the last 2 years, had fallen away from the faith, had decided she wasn't Christian anymore, didn't believe in Jesus. And she traveled the whole world trying to find truth. And she lived with all these different religious communities trying to find truth, and she saw that she was becoming dead inside. And then she started spending time with her old friends again. And she noticed that she was slowly coming back to life. And she said, I have to be honest about what it is that these people who bring me back to life have in common. What they have in common is the encounter with Christ. And I have to say the same thing with this experience of being accompanied by others. What they introduce into our marriage, into our relationship, is they reintroduce Christ to me, because it's Christ who can actually reawaken my desire and change my heart. And so it's this accompaniment that I see is absolutely necessary for marriage. And that's not something tacked on at the end, and I am done now, but it's not something tacked on at the end. I see that a life in Christ is absolutely essential to be able to say yes to our vocation the way that we did originally.